Welcome back, you here with Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about a request I received, and it goes as follows. Dear Dr. Goldberg, it is high time that you come to the realization that this online movement called Men Grabbing Their Own Willies is nothing more than a diabolical PsyOp to ensure that certain demographics in the West do not reproduce, permitting the elites to flood our borders with high numbers of low IQ, subservient socialist voters. Now, I want to say this comes from traditionalists or ethnic nationalists. You could push back and say 1964, LBJ, decades earlier FDR, neither of those were stopped by less diverse demographics, but then they're going to claim it's about cultural values, public safety, or just in general lack of degeneracy. And I would ascribe degeneracy more to the looseness of the economic system. And that doesn't get enough attention because a lot of people have this belief you can maintain this conservative, pristine, Christian America without, the influences of the economy, which basically says if there's a market, we're going to sell it. So that needs more attention in such circles, in my opinion. That being said, if we want to have any credibility with this type of claim, you're basically implying there's this bountiful population of young marriageable women available, and in fact these young men are just being brainwashed into narcissistic materialism by saying, oh, I'm going to go my own way. Let's be real, the rates of obesity are sky high. Now, it's for both men and women. I think the young women rate is like 50%. I couldn't find that exact one. I know that population-wide, it's somewhere close to 41%. On both sides, it's looking pretty grim, but yeah, trying to find a young woman who is not overweight, doesn't have a significant mental illness, whether that's actually there or just self-inflicted, and actually wants to get married, because that's the other thing. You could see a chick, but she may not want to actually get married at this stage in her life. At the same time, we're not going to let the guys off the hook, because we know in the MGTOW community there are a lot of bald cells, there's a lot of overweight cells, so this is not going to be like, oh yeah, they're all great guys, strapping young men, supremely desirable. I don't believe that, because I haven't seen it. And so it has to be, you sort of have to look at it from both standpoints. Now, considering MGTOW itself, I don't believe that there's anything called going your own way, unless a guy's legitimately asexual or just has absolutely no motivation whatsoever for a serious relationship or to get married, reproduction. That's a very small segment of the population. The reason they say going their own way is because it's more empowering, so to speak, than, let's say, oh, you've just been put in this state or this condition. Because if you're not attracting any women and women don't want to date you or marry you, they're not banging on your door, or at least taking a lot of notice and interest in you, you're not really walking away from them. You're just, this is your condition, right? You're, okay, I'm not really dating, I'm not going to get married because of how things are. I'm not saying it's all the fault of those guys. There's a lot of different factors we're going to talk about, but you can't just go, oh yeah, we're so desirable, we're just walking away. In fact, there was a guy, I remember, I think last year, and he's this homeless MGTOW, and he does a video like, with all these lockdowns, women are going to be wanting us MGTOWs. And I'm like, yes, definitely, they're going to be wanting you. There is that delusion. And again, it's a marketing tactic. You're going your own way. You're not really walking away from anything, though. It reminds me, this is early 2000s Jedi Academy, which was a fun game. If you were fighting one of the disciples of Ragnos, and you kind of retreated a bit to charge up energy or prepare a move, just to paraphrase them, if it was a modern woman, they'd be going, "Where are you going, incel?" In other words, women don't care that you're MGTOW. In fact, you're not going to see a lot of 18 to 21-year-old women on TikTok, oh, all these men are MGTOW, it's so sad. In fact, if a guy trolls her, she's just going to call him an incel and go about her day, because she's got plenty of other dudes interested. The women on YouTube who make videos on MGTOW tend to be middle-aged. and maybe they're divorced or they're trying to get married. I remember there was some chick, she wore all this bling, and she's like, oh yeah, you MGTOW guys are right. And I think a lot of guys simped for her, and then they found out she was married, and they didn't really like her husband, so then she lost popularity. Then you had Georgia Free. They're like, yeah, she's post-wall. But Georgia Free could still find a guy who wants to marry her. It's not over for Georgia Free unless she just chooses that her standards are too high. So you got to be at peace with that if you want to say you're going your own way, which you're not really going away from anything. Is that, okay, this is where you are, and probably not a lot of women want you. It's being enhanced by a bunch of, various factors, but this book came out in, I think it was the late 90s, and he got a lot of hatred. No, it's not true. Communities aren't in decline. But if you think about it, one of the big problems with the modern world and romantic relationships or dating is the fact that social settings have just gone into this massive downward spiral. Okay? You think of malls. Malls used to be the hangout place. That's where you met people. Malls are just dead zones. I've talked about this before. Their whole YouTube channel is dedicated to these ghost town malls. So unless you're maybe talking to the women working in the stores, you're probably not going to meet many people going out to the mall. And I've been researching this for the Black Pill book because all these guys will say, well, just go outside, brah. I'm like, where are you going, though? Bars. The bar scene is dead. Most of the time you go into a bar, unless it's in a college town, it's all middle-aged people in there. Nightclubs. I saw some stat that like 50% of nightclubs have closed in the UK. And even some years back, there were PUAs writing articles that you go into a nightclub and it's like 90% men, which if you think about it, that would be perfect for PUAs and red pillars. But, with that being said, where are you going to meet all these women? Oh, just go to the gym. I go to a gym, it's like 95% male. So you've got a small selection of women, but it's not nearly in abundance like they want you to believe. It's even worse if you're in the country because there's less population concentration. So that means you're going to see a lot of overweight women just because of a lot of the processed food. The number of attractive women, like where I am, I see more attractive women just driving on the highway. I look across, oh, she's attractive. I don't know how you get their number when they're in a car, speeding at 70 miles an hour. The point is, it might be a little bit easier if you're in a city because you have, again, more women on average. So you go to the coffee break, everyone's at Starbucks, you might have some in the line there or something, maybe on the subway. But if you're in the country, it gets brutal. If you're not in high school and you're not in college, which are some of the two places you have a better chance because there's a lot of women around. But if you consider the manosphere's general anti-intellectual and anti-education attitude when it comes to, learning, there's not a high probability that many of these guys are going to be in those settings. So that makes it even worse. They're going to say, no, we believe in education. You just have to be self-taught. That's fine. Not everyone's going to be self-taught. Just because you say you can learn it on the internet, a person made a good point. If you have no, financial stake in something, you may very well not treat it seriously. There are the autodidacts, like myself, but many people, if they're not actually invested, if there's nothing on the line, they don't care, and they won't apply themselves. They're not going to learn, no matter how many ebooks you tell them to read or watch this video. It doesn't matter. And of course, then you have the confluence of online dating, which has made it worse because with social media, everything is about physical attraction. No one cares. We don't have the attention span to read a profile. It's all about, are you pretty or not? And consequently, it has sliced a bunch of dudes out of the dating market. So this is when I say it's not guys going their own way. It's guys basically being invisible to women and not wanting to admit it. But this is a big part of it. You have a ton of competition. There's no going out. A woman doesn't have to go in a social setting and just deal with the guys there. She's got hundreds and hundreds that will hit her up. We know that women have always wanted positive reinforcement, compliments. This is also something that I've looked into research for the Black Pill book. Where better than the internet? Where else are you going to get constant hits, dopamine rushes? Look, these people like me. they're sending me, flirtatious messages. It all comes together. And people are in denial because they're still stuck in this kind of Gen X or early millennial. No, it's just about kind of vibing and hanging out, brah. I'm just saying. We also have to consider the influence of economic changes. You know that a lot of guys in the manosphere are big shills for the free market, for corporations. But if you have less economic security, that's also part of the problem. We know that some of the highest and most brutal divorces are in the working and lower middle class, where you also have less economic security. So when you are basically promoting this model, I'm not suggesting the Manospherians actually had any role in it, because they're just basically shilling for propaganda produced by the rich. The rich are great at casting themselves as winners and also victims, to where you feel like, oh, we've got to support them because they're being harassed. They push all this stuff, but of course, if you have, lower wages, if you have bad benefits, you have crappy healthcare, all of these things make it less likely that you're going to be able, even if you do find a decent woman, to say, okay, I can settle down in the West, I can get married, or at least have a long-term relationship, I can have kids, because there's, again, what's going to support that? And the guy might not be Mr. Chad, but if he's economically secure, a woman has less motivation to step out. Whereas if he's on the margins working low-wage jobs, it's easier for her to say, okay, yeah, again, amplifying hypergamy. Because they always say this, it's my hypergamy and family court divorce laws. That stuff is legitimate, but it's also become dogmatic, because that stuff is amplified by everything else. But they just want to fixate on that one particular aspect because they don't really like putting things together. So yes, you are more likely to get divorced if you have less economic security. Because then the woman might say, well, hell, I can trade up for something better. This guy's got a better job. It's more of a, dog eat dog type mentality. Instead of having overall that stability, you can pay for your child's education, you can raise a family and whatnot. So there's a whole, like I said, constellation of things coming together. And people don't want to accept it because they're still fixated on their political ideology here, their social romantic ideology over here, the religious right here. Things have to be meshed together. And, people, they always ask, they're like, Goldberg, why do you care about these topics? Because I think ultimately they're going to become unavoidable. You are going to see a lot more research into these categories in the coming years. It's just that society is very lazy, because the people who have stuff, the people who are secure, don't care much about anyone who is experiencing something they are not. So even though I'm in pretty decent shape financially, have an attractive girlfriend, I'm not going to be blind to what's going on, because I see it becoming an increasingly larger social problem. And that has to be appreciated if you want to fully understand the world. So it's like, what's the quote? Don't tell me now you've come to care for the simp. Expecto coctonum. Incels? After all this time? Always. So you see, I've got a big heart, and I'm always kind of serving humanity. And that's just what ultimately, it's important. And very few people get to this point, because it's easier to relegate yourself to emotional nonsense like, we're MGTOW, oh no, we're traditionalists, we're reproducing, you're losers. Oh, it's so easy to just simplify instead of saying what's going on, what's fueling it. And once you understand that, you can actually begin to say, all right, now we can take corrective steps, but you need that enlightenment. And that is the biggest hurdle, at least to start.